applications these days.
Okay.
Let's see.
I didn't hear it yell out that it's recording, but it says it is. I guess because of the.
Okay, am I muted too?
Yeah, it says recording up the top right.
I must. I guess my mic is working.
Yeah, because I'm muted.
Okay.
All right, take it away.
We good to go?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Hey everybody. Again, I'm Scott Werner, CEO and founder of Sublayer, and I'm here to talk to you about how humans will talk to AI about software. And yes, this is using monkey's paw. So quick show of hands, how many of you have used Claude Code, Codex, Gemini CLI, one of the like agentic coders? Cool. So keep your hands up if you are using, sorry, if you use it to write more than 50% of your code. How about are using YOLO mode or kind of accept all permissions? Yeah. Have you gotten to the point where you're doing like multiple and just like letting them loose? No. Okay. So the reason I ask like those questions, like that's kind of the progression that you get as you get more and more comfortable with it. You start to get more used to its quirks. You start to, letting it write more and more of your code. Eventually, you get annoyed by it asking you permission to write the code that you want it to write anyway. And then eventually you get bored sitting there watching it, and then you spin up another project to do while it's working. And so yeah, the thing about it is like AI coding keeps getting better. The models keep getting better. The harnesses we have around them, like Claude Code, AMP is another one that they're doing a lot for like finding the unique like attributes of the models and setting it up to use them without you really needing to know about what's going on under the hood. That keeps getting better, and we keep getting better at using them, right? Like you learn new techniques, you figure out what works, what doesn't work, and you route those problems that it works well for to them. And it's something that I've noticed in myself. I'm up in we've got like 3 or 4 projects at the same time. But the thing that's been stuck in my mind, and I'm guilty of this too, is that I have this question in my head, like why are we using these to just build the same things that we've been building for the last 20 years? There's so many things these can do, but we're just like making B2B SaaS faster. And then another question that kind of comes to your mind once you start down this trajectory and you get more and more comfortable with it writing code, you start to ask, do we need frameworks when AI can write all the code? And there was a talk, at the conference where they kind of hinted at this. Do we need frameworks? Do we need libraries when I can just write a prompt and it can write the code I want? I don't have to add a dependency to my code. And I've had this question as well, but I think, I'm here talking to you, so I have an answer. Again, I actually forgot I referenced Alan Kay in the last talk.
Big fan.
Big fan. Alan Kay gave this talk back in '97 titled "The Computer Revolution Hasn't Happened Yet," and I highly recommend checking it out. Or if you have seen it, rewatch it now with like the benefit of everything that's changed. It's super interesting to see him talk about the stuff that him and his team at Xerox PARC back in the 60s and 70s, 30 years later, are like, yeah, you aren't doing what we did so many more cool things. And then see it again like another 30 years later and see like a lot of those things still haven't come to pass. And what he talked about in that talk was, and I guess kind of the excuse or the explanation for why that is that he gave this example of, when there's a technological advance, you can kind of stay on this 2D plane and automate the old and just like do the old thing, do the things that you were doing faster. The other option is to add a new dimension, change your perspective, and go off in that new direction and leverage the new. What is this new thing trying to be? What does this offer? What new things can we do that we couldn't before? Or how does this change? How does this change things? And so I think, that question of do we need frameworks anymore is coming from a place of, well, if I'm automating the old, how can I have AI write all my old code for me? But I think, he says like having these blue thoughts, and like a blue thought might be, what communication protocol do I need to collaborate with an AI? And, you know, I think the answer, these are large language models after all. And so I think there are really interesting things to learn from the field of linguistics. And that is this concept of pidgins and creoles. And so a pidgin is this simplified language that when two groups of people come together that speak a different language and need to find a way to trade or communicate with each other, a simplified language comes up so that they can actually get what they're trying to do done. And then a funny thing happens, that kids are born into these communities and they grow up learning these pidgins as a native language. And then they turn into what's called a creole. They're a real language. They have a richer vocabulary, a full grammar. And one funny thing is that if you've heard of Hawaiian pidgin, it's actually a creole. It's kind of confusing, but the thing is that this transformation happens naturally, but it takes on all these other attributes that kind of weren't planned. And so I think that is a really great framework to think about the different techniques you need to learn, and the ways to interact with AI when working with different frameworks. And so I don't know how many of you have had like good experiences with AI or Claude or something using React or Rails or Tailwind. And part of the reason is that there's a ton of training data. It's trained on so much. You know the concepts, you know the words. When I say React component, there's so much baked into those two words that that the AI also knows, and that if we're communicating with each other, there's a lot baked into that, and it's not just like an HTML button, right? But if you've got internal frameworks at your company or like internal libraries, things that aren't super popular, those same techniques aren't going to work. And you need to do things like few shot prompting, where you put examples into your prompt, maybe copy and paste the docs. Or, there's this concept called in context learning, which basically means the AI can regurgitate the things you put in the prompt. And when you have to do those techniques, like you can kind of think about that as a pidgin, whereas if it's trained, you can communicate with it as a creole, where you're not really, if a pidgin, you're like trying to learn it, you're pointing at fish, and like you're pointing at the thing you're trying to trade for the fish. You don't need to do that with the frameworks that it's been trained on. And so I've been really interested in this idea and have built this AI agent gem in Ruby gem, called VSM. And VSM stands for Viable System Model. It's this concept from cybernetics that says that, any system that can survive and adapt has 5 essential functions. And I've been using this to really explore what techniques do you need to use to get AI to effectively write the code and work with a new framework, because oddly enough, I haven't been able to find anybody that actually built a software system based on VSM. So I am actually having a lot of trouble with getting it to write this code. And there's a ton of text on here. You don't actually have to read all this, which you'll see in a minute why. But the idea, so the viable system model, essentially the 5 components are identity, governance, coordination, intelligence, and operations. And the way I have it set up for this agent framework is, the identity is the agent's purpose. Governance is things like, in Cloud Code, where it asks you for permission to run a command or something that would live in governance. Coordination, where if you're running tools in parallel, making sure that, manages turn taking, scheduling, make sure there's no locks. Intelligence is essentially the connection to the LLM. And then operations are tools and skills, but also it's recursive. So something in operations can also be its own VSM capsule, and you kind of get this infinite recursion. And yeah, so let's jump into it. So actually, the things I'm trying to learn from the VSM architecture is, how do you set up these named responsibilities so that you have this shared vocabulary? Capsules being set up the way that they are You have these recursive building blocks that you can kind of do anything with just those simple 5 systems, making tools first-class citizens, and what does a framework look like if it's built for AI collaboration from day one. And so I've got a couple live demos for all of you. I put out recently version 0.2 of the gem, which comes with a bunch of new features. Since this is a monkey's paw, this is not the actual interface. It actually hallucinated what the interface would be. But I guess one other thing I haven't touched on is, one of the surprising things that has come out around, especially around agents, is this return to the command line. And so actually jump over to this, sure it's working. So one of the things that was released in the new version of VSM is this ability to create your own command line agents that use tools really quickly. And so all you need to do is VSM new file reader, and it creates a file reader capsule for you. And it actually comes with a file reader tool, partly for this demo. And what you can do is let's see, bundle, and sorry, see, file reader. And so you get this agent that you can chat with, very similar to Claude Code. So if you say something like, what tools are available, it will look at the tools. It says it has a read file tool. Can everybody see this? Should I make this a little bit bigger?
Yeah.
So look at the back. It's got a read file tool, and what you can do is say like, write a joke about the contents of the readme file in this directory. And so it uses the read file tool, and then why did the file reader app break up with its API key? Couldn't handle the pressure of secrets. So it's simple. So yeah, it's a very simple starter, but you get this tool to work with. We also have added, so I get a lot of questions of why Ruby, and one of the things that I think Ruby makes really easy, and I feel like is really underexplored with AI, is how flexible it is at runtime, how it can introspect a lot of running code and existing code and modify itself. And so the other thing that came out in this version is this meta tools set of tools. So what we can do is actually, oops. Anybody curious? This is what the system kind of looks like. You define the different identity governance coordination. You have classes, you can customize them any way you want, and then you put your tools in operations. And so let's go back to the looks like file reader, and then if you do what tools are available, it actually uses the meta list tools, which it gives you the read file tool, but also it can summarize itself. It uses this one, which, for those of you that read Markdown, these bolded titles, and be a meta explain tool, which actually reads the code and reads the running code, and explain a role. So if you do something like, what is this capsule's identity? If you've actually customized it, it'll call meta explain role. It'll give you the details. It has the details of what this actual class should do. And then I think this one might say very, very generic, but it's kind of a start to give it the details to be able to start introspecting itself, and as it's running, be able to interact with it. I didn't have time to get to actually generating tools live here, but that's coming in a future version. So generator tool will be able to use it rather than having to restart, but then also be able to ask it what is this tool actually going to do? But you can do something like, can you explain the file reader tool? And it's going to actually use the meta explain tool, which gives you much more details, the actual code, and everything like that. You can kind of be pretty verbose. Um, the other thing that came out in this version, and we've got this whole directory of examples, is being able to um, add an MCP server. So if there are any MCP servers that you use or want to explore, or want an agent to be able to do, yes?
I know what an MCP server is, but I'm gonna be done. So what's an MCP server?
MCP server, sure. So an MCP server is kind of like a collection of tools that primarily an AI agent uses, which are basically function as kind of like an API, but the spec has a lot more around a description and basically being able to describe what the tool should do or what the tool will do to give an AI agent the ability to kind of decide what tool to actually, if it's trying to do something, it knows what to do.
So what's the example of a server that you use?
I use, there's Playwright has an MCP server. Google just put out, the Chrome team just put out Chrome DevTools MCP server. So you can do stuff like get performance data on a page, drive a page, things like that. Claude Code also has its own MCP server. So you can kind of do weird kind of chainy things with it.
There's a Rails MCP server now too.
Yes.
Two that I use every day are the Jira MCP server, so I can read my tickets and my tickets, and the GitHub one so that they can like create jars, read jars.
Yes. That's actually the Jira ones. It's really interesting. And MCP has really been dismissed a lot as like, oh, it's just APIs. But one of the really cool things that's happened is my experience of getting API keys for things like Jira or the other internal tools at companies is a huge hassle. But the way it's set up now is you can just download the MCP server. So you basically get an API for anything that your company's using and not have to go through the route of like requesting an API key, which is pretty cool.
How does that work? Is it just like doing a walk for you? And like, okay.
Yeah, and then so there are actually, I guess I can go into this a little bit too. There's remote servers, and then one of the things that's I find really interesting that we actually have been able to do for a long time, but nobody's done it before, is you can to have MCP servers running locally on your machine and have your applications be able to communicate with each other. They've set it up to be JSON RPC over standard IO, which if language servers like the LSP protocol or LSP is started using and started to popularize, and then this is kind of taken it even further where I've seen people build like Unity MCP servers and Blender MCP servers and like kind of letting, or what is it, like Logic Pro or some DAW, and like letting AI kind of loose on your applications. But one of the things about that is they're very opaque, and you might, you're trying to do it through Claude Desktop or something like that. It's hard to see what they can do, and actually, if you just want to use them without an agent, how to do it. And so what you can do here, if you want a command line agent that maybe you want your version of Claude that posts social media posts for you, you can find like a social media MCP and just like set that up. You can have the governance to have the approvals.
Sorry, I don't want to derail this.
Sure.
I'm really interested in MCP, and like I actually started to do a little experimenting, and it wanted like these crazy scopes to my Google account. And I was like, hell no, I'm not going to give you the ability to do all these things. So I created a special Google account, blah, blah, blah. Like, what's the security model in this?
So there is a quote that's the S in MCP stands for security.
That's awesome.
It is very much at your own risk. And so you can what was I going to say? Yeah, you generally want to know, if it's the official Google one, I'd probably be okay if it's some random one you find on read it? Probably not. Or at least like look at the code and see what it's doing, right? Or just like build one. The one of the things that Anthropic, who kind of put out the protocol, is they've set it up and set the documentation up and kind of similar to what I'm talking about here is like set it up so that when an agent needs to know how to do a thing about it, they've got documents and things like that. So if you go to actually just do it right here, model context protocol.io/llms.txt, it actually has an index. And so if you want to build one, all the documentation is available there, and it's set up in markdown files for the agents to be able to read. Yeah.
But the other thing to say out loud is that even if you trust the people who built the MCP, the LLM can do whatever you give it permission to do, not necessarily have to ask you to do it.
True. But so I've got a demo here, and so what tools are available. And what it's going to do is actually list the tools in the Claude MCP server, which, task, bash, glob, grep, etc. And then you can do things like you grab the content and summarize site, and so it should uses web fetch, and it's going to pull the contents and hopefully do something. Nice. Yeah, and so like it's Claude Code is one example, but I think there are all different types of agents you might want to use if you give them a certain number of tools and can have them do things for you. And so back here. Oh, question. Sorry.
You have a move query text counter.
Oh, yes. So that's from conversation design. That a turn is a request and a response. That is really just in there as debugging. Yeah. And so what I think this means is that frameworks kind of become negotiation protocols. That, if you have these defined concepts and self-documenting systems that both humans and AI can understand, you enable communication at a higher level of abstraction than purely code, and your architecture, becomes a conversation. And so, the lesson for me is that, by designing for AI and human comprehension, you end up starting to design for agentic maintainability. And, learning both of these techniques of how you interact with, a Pidgin framework or a Creole framework are very, very important. And, you don't, the techniques really don't overlap. And so part of, if you're running into trouble or you're running into problems with Claude doing something or not doing something that you want, maybe you're working with a Pidgin or you're working with a Creole. And, over time, if you're designing your frameworks and thinking of your code as a Pidgin, those I think are the kind of frameworks that end up becoming Creoles and end up, having enough examples to actually be useful and not have to not require so much extra context to work with effectively. And so that's it. VSM is available on GitHub, or you can just gem install VSM. I wrote up a little bit more about this on worksonmymachine.ai. And yeah, you can reach me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Sublayer. Thanks.
Hey.
Yes. I just want to say, stop scared the hell out of me. The reason
Great.
is that we were talking about AI writing code, and then what I noticed was missing was debugging code or operating code, and I think that's where the pink. The pink is we know how to operate frameworks that are like written now, right? So we know how to run stuff in Ruby and Rails.
Yep.
Like I don't know if we know how to operate the stuff that showed that was more of the blue style.
Mhm.
Right? And maybe that's just your answer is maybe we just need to learn to, but like, I don't even know how you even start to learn to.
Can you say more?
Sure.
About that?
So like the code that you wrote,
Mhm.
First of all, I'd be very interested to like hear like what the production, like what a productionized version of that code was.
Mhm.
If it even is just like create a blog post from an outline, right? Like which I think is a perfectly valid like workflow that could
Yep.
save a ton of people a ton of time, but like debugging that and operating it at scale, especially if it's something more crucial than like blog posts. I don't know how you learn how to do that.
Yeah, I think partly it's repetition, just getting your hands dirty and trying. One of the things that has been on my mind is, actually like Brandon said at the conference, if you write code as clever as you can, you're not smart enough to debug it. If AI is writing all of your code, you're probably not even clever enough to read it. And if it's writing at such a volume that you don't even have time to read it. And so I think, there's it's actually, actually to piggyback on the things that Brandon said, I think we are going to enter another period that really is very similar to the early period of Ruby and Rails, where, the sentiment almost was like Java solved programming. Like we've got this type system. We finally figured it out. And then the Rails community comes around and like, yeah, but what if we don't do any of that? What if we have meta programming and you actually don't know, we can change the classes at runtime. Who cares? And that, made a lot of people uncomfortable and caused a lot of bugs. Like I worked at Groupon, the site went down. There was there was like a poll anytime a new engineer started of how long it would take them to bring the site down. The routes files metaprogrammed, it was nuts. Shouldn't. Um, uh, but yeah, I think it's we'll probably go through a period of instability as it just becomes outside of the tools that we have available and outside of like our experience. And I'm sure but we'll probably go through a period, right? And we kind of went through this period with Rails where there were so many things to do and you kind of needed a framework and a language like Ruby that you could get a lot done really quickly because people were growing at a huge scale. There were so many things to actually build. And then we figured out the patterns, things have kind of, stabilized, and you don't necessarily need that trade-off of that flexibility. And that's, I think, why you see a lot of the shift to Rust and Go and TypeScript, where you're not really doing anything new. You're doing the same things that we've always done, but you just need it to be stable and reliable and not really doing anything outside of the box. Right now we're in the go outside of the box phase. And I think once we've figured out what things we actually want to put guardrails around, we will.
Do you have
Yes.
any thoughts on best practices for reviewing AI code? How much of your code should be? I mean, you're running like 3 projects at once. How do you deal with like security concerns and things like that?
So one of the things I do is I make sure that, everybody has a different scale for this, but I, roughly like whatever you think a 1 point story is, like generally about that size of work. And then I have it write out its plan, and scan that for any kind of things. Roughly at one point, you generally know like roughly how it should be implemented. See if there's any red flags in the plan, and afterwards have it tell you what it did and tell you how to test what it did. And I go in and just like manually test. But generally, I don't really review the code beyond that because it's just too much of it. But one of the things the other thing I have found is, usually to like pull something out as a library, it's like a longer period of like this thing has proved its worth. We need to pull it out as a library. I found doing that earlier, and especially in places where it keeps getting it wrong and keeps tripping up, pull it out as a gem, pull it out as a library, get it out of that repo, and just say like, here's the README, here's the interface. Wrap it. It's easy to get 100% test coverage on that, and then never touch it again. And unless you need to add new stuff, but like it's not in the context window, it's not gonna
It's just a
break that.
face.
Yeah.
Curious about language choice. So clearly you like Ruby for its insane flexibility for this kind of new era. Would you say that Ruby is ideal for this kind of work in the future, or do you anticipate that there will be kind of a new language with a fundamentally different paradigm that would kind of like be better suited to replace kind of everything?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'll Ruby's flexibility is one of the big things for really experimenting with different things. The other thing is, when you need to scan a lot of code really quickly, you're usually not looking at a lot of Ruby code, which like if you're, other languages where it's like hundreds and hundreds of lines or something, it's easy to, overlook something where, something scannable is definitely a benefit. I also think the conversational nature of the way it kind of looks like prose, I think that's a benefit. But yeah, there have been some experiments I've seen around people making like LLM optimized languages, but though I don't think I've seen any that have gone beyond like demos or experiments. There's like pseudolang, a pseudocode programming language for LLMs. It's one that kind of comes to mind. There were, I don't know, there are a couple others, but there's also what's it called? This Shoggoth tongue, which people people got LLMs to kind of compress, basically told it like compress this conversation or compress this prompt into into something that only LLMs care about, or only readable by LLMs, use emojis, use Unicode characters, whatever. And you had these kind of like these strings kind of like this come out and actually have, this is the response, right? All different kinds of things like that. So there might be something that like, because of, these alien technologies, they can, they understand things differently, or, something out there in latent space, and we end up not even being able to read the code at all.
Oh gosh,
Oh, what's that? We can't really buy it.
no consequences
true, yeah.
we had there.
Well, it sounds like that's good too.
Mm.
Well, once they change the model really. So
I think I saw on LinkedIn or somewhere, so there was like a phone call, and it seems that one AI called to another AI. And at some point they figured out that both of the participants are AI machines, and they switched to some beeping sound. I think that's what you were speaking about. Yeah, so kind of communication between AI that is more optimized. They can process much more data within a certain amount of time than we in our average language. Yeah, and I think about languages, the same idea, like frameworks and so on. They will, especially Ruby, it was made for human, but you don't need to understand it anymore. So it might be much lower level. Like for instance, I didn't care about it, but let's mention like AI writes code in assembler, and you don't care because you won't ever open this code. So why should you care? So we might make a turn back into like code not for humans but code for machines, and you have like some language level interface directly.
Right.
Is it partially overlaps with what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I think I'm probably going to go with VSM, where it's what is this system? What's it going to do? Okay, you can do that, right? Rather than actually looking at the code, just more introspecting on the system itself. And I didn't mention it here, but I've also been building like a Claude code, like an agentic coder called AIRB off of VSM to kind of drive what that might look like.
What else?
One more?
Two great talks in 1 week. It sounds like quite the effort. So thank you again.
No, thank you.